War. War never changes. Except from when there's an update that changes warfare. In a recent livestream, it was confirmed that Keen Software House, the developers of Space Engineers, currently doesn't have a Warfare 3 update on their roadmap. We know their roadmap currently includes an AI overhaul, an exploration update, and an endgame update, and after that we have no idea. So whilst this might change in the future, currently Warfare 3 isn't happening. But, hypothetically, if Warfare 3 did happen, what would it add? So I asked you guys what they might hypothetically add in a Warfare 3 update, and I'm going to look at the previous 2 Warfare updates to see what they added, to see if we can work out from there what they're going to add next. So Warfare 1 added a multitude of new cosmetic blocks, but the main feature of it was an overhaul to ground combat. This included an overhaul of shooting mechanics and 2 new weapons, that being the rocket launcher and its variants, and the pistol and its variants. 10 months later, we received the Warfare 2 update, which is one of the biggest updates we've had for Space Engineers since release. In this update, we got an overhaul to ship combat and new weapons. Lots of new weapons. And I mean a lot of new weapons. With this, we also got the custom turret controller, which allowed us to build our own custom turrets rather than relying on the base game ones. Again, in this update, we got a bunch of new cosmetic blocks as well, but what cosmetic blocks they add is a bit more difficult to predict than other things. So, now that what they've added previously is out of the way, let's have a look to the future. One of the highest requested things for a hypothetical Warfare 3 update was another combat rework. So, whilst the combat was reworked in Warfare 1, it's still a bit, shall we say, clunky. It's definitely a lot better than it was before, and I'm not expecting the combat in this game to be Call of Duty level. But if you've ever used any of the weapons, it just feels really difficult to actually hit anything. Now, first and foremost, Space Engineers is a game about building ships, so the priority should be on the ship combat. However, in the scenarios, a lot of the time you're using these hand weapons, and as mentioned previously, one of the updates we're getting is to do with exploration, and if we're going to be exploring things like abandoned space stations and stuff, maybe having better shooting mechanics might be a good idea. Especially as the interior turret seems to have laser pinpoint accuracy. My rifle seems to miss every single shot I fire from it, although that could be a skill issue. As I mentioned, the reworked mechanics in Warfare 2 were much more in depth than the previous updates, and the Future Grid AI update seems to be much more in depth as well. So if we got another rework for ground combat, I could imagine it would be much more in depth as well. Better ground combat could also benefit from the addition of more weapon types. Now, most video games break them down into categories, and I think adding one weapon of each of these categories would be good. One of my biggest asks for Space Engineers would be a sniper rifle, because hitting things at range is really difficult. Whilst technically the weapons have pinpoint accuracy at range, as soon as that target is moving, you have absolutely no chance of hitting them. And at close range, we could benefit from having a shotgun as well. Sometimes you need a good shotgun to take down those sabroids. And finally, a little bit of fun. As the rocket launcher is basically a handheld version of the missile turret, I feel like we need a handheld version of the Gatling gun, because everyone loves a good minigun. Now, there is one type of weapon I've omitted from this list, and that's melee weapons, but I think we've already got that covered. Another addition that you guys were keen for a future Warfare update was more ship weapons. Now, whilst I'm personally not convinced that we need more weapons, you guys did have a couple of suggestions for which ones they need to add. One of the big suggestions was a dedicated point defense turret for shooting down missiles, and missiles are already the weakest weapon in the game, so I don't feel like they need a further nerf. Flak weapons was another one that you guys are really interested in. I guess the idea would be that these flak turrets would be used for shooting down small grids. Maybe they deal more damage to light armor or small grids so that they can fulfill the role of anti-air weapons. And the thing most of you wanted was tracking missiles. I know there was a mod that came out just after Warfare 2 that modified regular missiles to be tracking missiles, and I can see why a lot of you would want this to be added. I guess my main concern with this is that it's a balancing act, because if tracking missiles are too good, everyone will only use tracking missiles, as it means you don't have to aim them, you just fire off thousands of them, and they just annihilate whatever you're locked onto. But on the other hand, in order to balance the fact that these can track, they might make it really easy to shoot down missiles, which means that even though these missiles can track, they still wouldn't be as good as before. Missiles definitely need a buff though. As I said in my video where I rank all the weapons, they have too many negatives that make them not worth using, and the only positive they really have is that they do an AoE, so any kind of buff for them would be appreciated. Speaking of things that need a buff, you can give this channel a buff by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Shields are a mixed bag amongst the community of Space Engineers. I don't know what the exact statistics are of people that want shields and don't want shields, but there's definitely a lot of vocal people that really want them to be added to the game. When this video goes up, I'll add a poll on the community section of my channel where I'll let you vote whether or not you want shields or don't want shields, and you can let me know there why you think or don't think they should be added. I think the main reason people want shields is that building a ship takes a long time, and when you get into combat there's always a risk you could lose it. And I get that. Spending a long time building a ship only for it to be destroyed in its first fight isn't fun, and then you have to spend time building on the ship. It's the same when you crash a mining ship. You think, oh, I have to build a new mining ship now. And especially if you're just starting out in the game and aren't aware of all the methods to really quickly build ships, it can be quite off-putting to use these ships you've built in battle. However, I think on the other side, destruction is a big part of Space Engineers. For years, Space Engineers was just a game where you crash ships into each other and watch them get destroyed. And you can't deny watching a ship be destroyed and slowly fall towards the planet is really cool, and I think that's part of the magic that makes Space Engineers Space Engineers. I know one of the big things from the devs is that Space Engineers is supposed to be set in the near future of 2077, and a lot of the weapons in the game are still conventional, so they don't feel that shields would fit the game. However, if you want shields, the shield mod still exists, so if you want to use them you can. And let us not forget that safe zones also exist in the base game, and they can be used to protect your stations and bases from hostiles. By far the most popular suggestion for things to be added to Space Engineers in a potential warfare update were walker legs and tank treads, and this doesn't surprise me, as pretty much every keen live streamer about Space Engineers, this topic seems to come up. One of the big things a lot of people were saying was they could add a walker leg controller in the same vein as the custom turret controller, and I don't think this is likely. The custom turret controller only has to control a turret in 2 directions and then when to shoot. The amount of complexity that goes into creating a leg for a walker makes this much more difficult to make simple, and that's why quite a lot of the time walker legs are controlled by multiple timer blocks or scripts. I think more likely, if we were to get walker legs and by extension tank treads, they'd probably be their own dedicated block. A game that jumps to mind, which I haven't played for years, is Robocraft, which has built-in walker legs for you to use, and the idea being that you just equip them to your ship, they appear in multiple sizes like the current wheels do, and maybe you have to set timings on them so they don't all walk forward at the same time and fall over. Tank treads is another one that comes up very, very frequently. I feel like this is more likely to happen than walker legs, because it's something the devs have also expressed an interest in. There was an example recently of a mod that someone has created that dynamically creates tank treads around wheels, and I feel like this would probably be the easiest way to do it. You'd have some sort of custom tank suspension that you place on your grid, and then once you're done placing the suspensions, you select add wheel in the terminal like you normally would for a normal wheel, and then it adds a tank tread around the wheels. And that way the tank treads can be generated dynamically, so any kind of grid you build can have the treads. However, with this, you probably need a custom control scheme for both tank treads and walker legs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with what's known as tank controls, that being the case of where tanks can move on the spot as their 2 sides move independently from each other, and that you have to move both the left and the right wheel to move forward. And I think this would be a really interesting thing to add in a Space Engineers update, as it would give you something more interesting to add to your rovers, as currently there's very little reason to make them, and having these dynamic tank treads that add an entirely new control scheme might encourage more people to use them. Now, one of the biggest things that people requested that I've purposely omitted from this video is hostile AIs to fight. And as we know, grid AI is coming very, very soon. And that in the past, we were also told that this was going to overhaul hostile encounters. And the fact that we're also in an exploration update at some point, which I'd imagine would also include more hostile encounters, I think we can at least partially assume this issue will be resolved shortly. However, we won't have to wait long to find out. So let me know which of these ideas you'd like the most for Warfare 3. Maybe you'd like multiple of them to be added. And as always, like and subscribe for more Space Engineers content.